Hey, how you doing? I was thinking today about 200 years ago. Yeah, that's a while. That's actually a long time. But it's not that I remember that long ago, because I wasn't born that long ago. But I like the study of like genealogy and stuff like that. So I do a little research to find out how my ancestors lived in the past. It was a little sketchy back then. My fifth great grandfather was born in 1780. So that's sort of starts us on the 200-year journey. I only have certain data on him because he probably came here from Europe, like we all did. But they definitely were farming people. There was no high tech stuff back then. It was candles and maybe you could have like one or two pigs and a cow. If you were lucky, two cows. And they lived in, rustic cabins and stuff. Wood. Maybe they had a wood floor. Maybe it was just dirt. But that went on, like I said, from my fifth great grandfather to the fourth, to the third, to the second, and even to the first. It wasn't really any technology during that time frame. They all just had a few farm animals. Yeah, they might have gotten one or two better plows, but no, not technology. Even my grandfather, when he was born in 1916 down in Virginia. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have plumbing. They didn't have cars or refrigerators. And this is my grandfather. It's amazing when you think about it. That my father, who was, he was born in 35, was the first of this entire line to be born with some of the stuff that everybody thinks was commonplace forever. But yet it wasn't. Only going back to my father was it commonplace at all. But yet today, if your electricity goes out for like an hour, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. But everybody past him never even had electricity. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have running water. They didn't have anything that you would think of today as commonplace. Not to mention TVs or cars, because there also was none of those. So when I think back that my father was the first one in all of this line to ever grow up with a refrigerator, it's astounding, because you never would think of that. My third great grandfather was born around 1850. So you think to yourself, oh, 1850. Okay. His two older brothers served in the Civil War. That was from 1861 to 1865. And that's just my third great grandfather. So when you look at that, you go, the Civil War? it starts to collapse the time frame, and you start to get a grip on, like, what were these people doing in the past? Oddly enough, some of them were fighting in the Civil War. And that's the third great grandfather. So, time just keeps moving forward. They still had no technology. They still were just burning candles or an oil lamp in the evening, going to bed around sunset, because that's when it gets dark, getting up in the morning as soon as the sun comes up, and working on some degree of a farm to try to feed their families. Like I said, they had a couple of pigs and stuff like that. But it really compresses it when I think that my dad was the first one in all of these lines to grow up in a place, in a home, where he had electricity and running water, and could then go into a kitchen where there was an actual refrigerator. Everybody takes that for granted today. Even with me, I look at it and go, oh, don't be crazy. People have had refrigerators and plumbing forever. No. Only for the first time ever, going backwards, did my father have that. My grandfather didn't have that. He didn't have running water. He certainly didn't have electricity. He certainly didn't have a car. It's amazing when you think about, oh, it was only that prior generation. So, I used to always sort of razz or give my dad hell because he wasn't up on the technology. But in his lifetime, he never saw the kind of technology advances that my generation has seen over time with computers, cell phones, microwaves, and everyday advances. Watches, calculators, everything. I remember him saying to me one time after I got out of the Navy, and with all of the technical advances in that, because that's when Apple and everybody came out with the computer wars and the cell phones and everything started. And I said to him, well, you don't have a computer. And he just looked at me like, why would I need one? I never needed one before. Of course, he was right. He didn't have one before, and he never needed one. So, back in the mid 80s or so, I went out and bought him a computer to try to get him adjusted to it. It was a little difficult. There were a certain number of things then that he could see an advantage in doing. Mostly spreadsheets, because he understood math. He liked math, and he could see how fast a spreadsheet would do math. So he was like, "Oh yeah, this is great for calculating and doing math." Other than that, he never really found a use for it. But he did adapt to it to a certain degree. And I think by now we're on like the iPhone 14 or something. I can't even imagine telling my grandfather, if he were still alive, about, oh, you have to get the new iPhone 14, because most of his life he didn't even have electricity or running water. It's what I'm saying about collapsing time and how ironic it would have sounded to him. Now, like I said, he was born in 16. And so a huge piece of the technology explosion was during the World War II, which he served in World War II. He went over to Germany and stuff, and was in that war. And I think that really expanded his definition of what could be done. And every country went through that. Here in the U.S., when a lot of the guys went over there, and industrialization was huge, and a lot of the women started working in plants in the U.S. That was a first. That never happened before. And then, of course, here there was a huge expansion of the whole road network system, housing, and housing became more centralized into towns. And that was also around the first time that my great grandfather moved away from a farm type setting where he didn't have running water and electricity and into more of a city type setting. For the first time in his life, him and his wife had all of these conveniences. I guess you would call them conveniences. Today, everybody just expects that. But they never had those in their house today. They never had those in their house in the past. Now they could have them today. And I just can't even imagine, when they first moved into that house, having real plumbing, hot water, showers, bathtubs, the toilets, the electric lights, and everything else. What a huge change. Because even until the 1930s, refrigerators weren't big, cars weren't big. It's not like everybody had those things. So that goes back to what I was saying. Only in my dad's generation was it the first time that they sort of grew up with those things. Now it's a whole nother story when you get to my generation, where, Steve Jobs is out creating Apple, and, well, of course, Wozniak was big on that. But nonetheless, the explosion of technology with, of course, cars, refrigerators, TVs, video recording equipment, microwave ovens, and the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. The cell phones, of course, with the newest iPhones and everything else. The total explosion of the internet, Netflix, on and on and on. Astounding. I couldn't even imagine trying to explain all of this to my grandfather, who was born in 1916. He would have just looked at me and went, "You're crazy. That's like science fiction stuff." No. It is like science fiction stuff. But yet, here we are today. And that's the end of that beer. Take care of yourself. Until the next time, I'll see you later.